I'll give you a few minutes to collect yourselves. And what we're going to go over today is the agreement of sale. We're going to go over the standard agreement of sale for residential property. In your, wherever you fetch your documents from, whether it be .loop or DocuSign or Lone Wolf, Transaction Desk or what have you, the standard agreement of sale of real estate or residential property, the short code is ASR. ASR. And we'll try to make this as lively as we can make it, but this is contract speech, so it's going to be a little bit dry on the dry side, but we'll try to make it a little more lively than what we have in front of us. I'm going to do a screen share. So if you're unable to get your hands on or your eyes on a standard agreement of sale, I put it on the screen for you. We're going to walk down through point for point. Try not to breeze over too much. So if you have any questions as we're going through, please don't hesitate to either raise your hand on Zoom or just jump in and ask if there's something you don't understand. If it is something that we're going to go down into a rabbit hole on, well, it feels like we will, we'll definitely break off and we can one-on-one any questions that you have. Or you can write your questions out after we're done and join us tonight at 7:30 on this same link for a recap and have your questions prepared there. We can go over them as well at that point. So let's jump right in. Page 1, standard agreement of sale for residential real estate. Does anybody have any questions about the first section? Parties, who goes where? It's pretty straightforward. Your buyers, your sellers, your buyer's mailing address, your seller's mailing address. I will give you a point tip on it that comes straight to us from the PARealtors.org. Again, another resource for you. If you're a part of PAR, you can access this document, all documents there at their website, in addition to guidelines, which we're going to be going over their usage guidelines today for this document. So they tell us buyers, starting the word buyers, insert the name of the buyer. Be sure to list all buyers to make sure each one is fully bound to the agreement. Okay? If a buyer is not present for the sale of the property because they are not part of the transaction, they do not go on this document. Okay? Husband and wife team or whatever the case may be, spouse and spouse, you have to make sure that both parties that are represented in the transaction are represented on the agreement. Same thing for sellers. Property. Address including the city. So you have the city and the zip code. This is the tax Blair County and Blair County anyway, but you can access these documents on Courthouse Online. I know that Allegheny County has a portal as well to access tax documents. Whatever the tax ID address is what you're going to be putting here. So whatever the county, said county believes is or identifies as the address, that is the address that you're going to put in this section here for the address of the property. Okay, in the municipality of, the zip code, in the school district of, and the county of. That information should be on your property description. If you're working a FSBO listing, again, most of this documentation can be found at your county's registrar's office, deed records, or where you can typically find that information if it's not on a property description or if it's a FSBO. Tax ID numbers are also on that same tax card, in addition to deed book, page number, recording date, so on and so forth. That information is accessible. If you have any questions or concerns with getting that information, please let me know and we will point you in the right direction to make sure you can get it. Moving on, buyer's relationship with the PA licensed broker. Business relationships, as identified by the PA licensing board, the PA licensed broker and seller's relationship boxes on the front page of the agreement are used to identify the brokers and licensees involved in the transaction to describe their business relationship. Real Estate Licensing and Registration Act requires that brokers identify, 1, the capacity in which they are engaged in the transaction, and 2, whether the broker or any licensee affiliated with that broker has provided services to any other party within the transaction. So those boxes right here that are clickable, you can check them or check them with wet ink. That identifies your relationship with the buyer. Are you a buyer's broker, buyer's agent? Are you buyer's agent with a designated agency where only the licensee named on this contract can represent them? Or are you a dual agent? The other option down below is transaction licensee. And we have information that we've gone over in the past regarding these designations. We can dig a little bit deeper on what each of them means. For a glance at what they are, you can also refer to what?
The consumer.
Go ahead.
The consumer notice.
That's right. You can find the information or representation definitions for each of these on the consumer notice.
I had a question before you scroll.
Yes.
Do I put for broker company, I seen something that said SSHL, or do I put Pittsburgh East? What are we using?
So the correct designation for our license, we do business as Keller Williams exclusive. Okay.
Okay.
So our license, we are doing business as. The license number, company license number, is actually more important and carries more weight legally than what you would put in the broker by company, because the licensing board is going to associate the business with the license number.
Okay.
Okay. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Okay. All right. If you're a buyer's agent and you are filling this out for an offer. Yes.
So I put this building location.
Mm-hmm.
Is that okay?
That's fine. Yes. The 5425 Baum Boulevard is the correct address. For those of you in satellite offices, Johnstown or Altoona, there is a license in office for those offices. You can use that office's address or this office's address, because you are, by the commission's standard anyway, you are a licensed broker for SSH Realty's satellite office, and we have a real estate office designation number that we go by. So either can be put in there, but yes, the 5425 Baum Boulevard is your company address. For the seller, if you're filling this out as a buyer's agent, do we put the seller's relationship with their broker? Can we put that in there, or should we put that in there? Anyone?
No.
No. No. You can, as a courtesy, if it's provided for you, the licensee's name, the licensee's number, state ID number, state license number, but you're in no position to, you know, whether or not what their relationship with that seller is, right?
Oh, okay. That's at the very top, that box?
Right here. We don't know what, we can put the name in, we can put the license number in, we can do for the licensee and the broker, if, you know, if you're so inclined, as a courtesy.
Yeah.
Because we have that information. But when it comes to their designated relationship with the seller, we don't know. Right?
Right.
I mean, we don't know if they're a designated agency or not. Some are. We have one in Altoona that's a designated agency. So we don't pretend to know that information or even insinuate that we're going to try. So we just we leave it blank. We don't check any of these boxes. I've had agents call me and say, would you do me a favor and check that box and resend it? Not kidding. I've had an agent call me and say, it's a great offer, but can you do me a favor and check that box and resend it? So, you know, you just smile and you say, okay, and you check it and you send it over. You know, I mean, what the heck? All right, moving on. Remember, and I'll say this at the end of every page, remember, initials on every page, the bottom of every page, make sure you're getting your initials. Any questions on page 1 before we move straight forward and along?
No.
No? Again, there's further detail of the relationships with the buyers and the sellers on the consumer notice. There's even a flow chart at parealtors.org that you can find that helps break it down even further. If you want to go down that road, you certainly can to get the answers that you want, or give me a call. We can go over it, whatever you think. All right. Paragraph 1, the date. To establish the date of the offer, insert the date that the agreement is signed by the first party. In the dated blank. Do not predate or post-date the agreement. The day that you're filling this out is the date you put in there. This identification date on the agreement should not change as the form is being passed between the parties in negotiation. The purpose of this date is to identify which version of the original contract is being negotiated. So let's say you have to rewrite a contract and you don't redline it, you don't edit it, you don't edit the current one, you draft a whole new one. So now you've got a second document, but it's the next day. You're going to put the date you're drafting that contract on the top, okay? That way, as we just stated, you can go back and look at your contracts. Okay, which one are we going from, right? You look at those dates. The one that's the latest and that's executed is the one you're going from. That's your most important document. That's your most relevant document. Does that make sense, everybody?
Totally.
Yep. You good? Okay. If the parties should write a new agreement for the transaction, it would be acceptable to start the version of the agreement with a new date, as we just stated. Purchase price. Purchase price and deposits. Write in the purchase price by using numbers on the first line and write it out on the second and third lines. So you're going to put the numerical version and the written out version. It's like a checkbook. If you've ever written a check, you know in the box you put the numerical version and then you have to write out 150,000 and zeros. Okay, you don't have to do the 00 over 100, but you do have to write out the the alphabetical or the letter version, spelled out version of it on the second and third line. So first line is the numerical purchase price. Second and third line, if you need the third line, is the typed out version. Okay. Purchase price, again, spelled out in numerical version. When filling out an agreement to submit the initial offer, write the purchase price to the far left of the line to permit a seller to submit a counter offer. It's a little tip. So when you're filling this out, and I've seen a couple of these that do this, which is awesome because some of our programs they autofill this, right? So when you start typing into the block, it autofills it. I like this tip where you write the numerical version out way over here on the left-hand side by the dollar sign. I know, Stacy, you did it. I like that. It's a good look. And it also gives the seller, if they're going to counter, a space to make that counter. So just a little bit of a tip there. Okay. Initial deposit. The buyer will generally provide some sort of deposit or down payment immediately upon or shortly after the seller's acceptance of the agreement. It's more common these days for an agreement to be signed and submitted electronically. So when that occurs, the deposit check is typically not provided at the time, but arrives within a few days. If the agreement is being signed and will be delivered without the indicated deposit, Fill in a number of days that will afford you time to deliver the check to the seller. How many of you have had the need for more than 5 days? Has anybody had the need for more than 5 days? If you have, make sure you stress that in the initial deposit. That would be Section 2, subsection A, subsection 1, so A1, where it says 5 days if not specified. And you'll hear me say this a lot. If it's blank days and you want it to be 5 days, put the 5 days. Make sure we're still putting the 5 days in, okay? Make sure we're still expressly, ensuring that the contract is completed and thorough, okay? If you need that 5 days, put the 5 days in there, even though the contract tells you it's specified if you don't. Specify, always specify, okay? All right. There is an additional deposit option. Sellers may request additional deposits at specified times. That pretty much breaks it down in B. And regardless regarding how timeframes and what currency is being used. So you can look at those two subsections as well. Any questions on deposits? Okay. Seller assist. Any questions on seller assist, what it means, how much it is, before I dive into breaking it down for everybody? Does anybody have any initial questions? Okay, so seller assist is the percentage of the sale price that the buyer is requesting, or in some cases the seller is offering, to pay closing costs. 0 to 6% of the sale price. 6% is the maximum FHA. 3% is the maximum for conventional, typically. So, does that mean that a dollar amount in closing costs cannot be offered? It depends. Depends on the loan package, if it's allowed. Depends on what's being asked of the buyer regarding closing costs. And if they need a dollar amount, you can specify that there. But most of the time, it's going to be a percentage. Most of the time, it will be a percentage. Okay? Any questions on seller assist before we move on? Okay. Settlement and possession. Settlement and possession is pretty straightforward. Your settlement date. If you're a buyer's agent, you're filling this out. Settlement and possession is typically, we went over this last week, how many days from the date of the contract? 45. Typically 45. Again, we're coming into a holiday summer of holidays, where you have 4th of July. We're going to have Labor Day. Obviously, we have Memorial Day is pretty much behind us at this point with regards to real estate transactions, but you have it in there. If you have a holiday falling on within your term of that 45 days, maybe add a day or two. Remember, banks, lenders, typically not open on those holidays. Same as weekends. But 45 days is your rule, and then maybe add a day or two if a holiday is included. So settlement date, 45-ish days, heavy on the ish. Does that mean we can't close early? No. It does not mean you can't close early. It does not mean you can't close early. Does not mean you can't close before that, right? Same way as if it would need to be extended, all right? And you do have addendums for that. The provision of the specific date for settlement may only be changed by the agreement of both parties. To extend settlement beyond that date set in the agreement, is always necessary to have a written addendum to the agreement changing that date. Although not legally required, it is also good practice to get a written addendum to change the settlement to a date earlier than that stated in the agreement. So it is not legally required to change the to put it up, change in terms of addendum amount if you're moving the date up, but you still should. You should, anytime you alter this agreement, if Jennifer Burns is watching this right now, she's probably cursing me out because I even mentioned it. But that it's a possibility that you don't have to. You should. Anytime that you alter this agreement in any way, you should always draft a change in terms addendum. Okay? All right. Any questions on settlement and possession? Okay. We'll go past. You've got taxes, purposes of prorating real estate taxes. The period covers as follows. Remember, school tax, city tax, municipal tax, county tax. You get your millages from your county website. Every county has a millages breakdown of each municipality within or in school district within the county, and you can calculate those millages. Those of you who are just recently in real estate school should remember how to do that. If you don't, not hard. It's really not hard. You get the millages, you establish the assessed value of the property, get the millages by calculating it, the assessed value times 0.0. And if it's a 2-digit millage before the decimal point, it's 0.0 to that number. So if it's 15, it'd be 0.015, yada, yada, yada. If it's only 1 digit, it's 0.00. So really you're sliding the decimal point over from the left to the right. How many spaces? Three spaces. Okay? You're moving that decimal point to the thousandth number. Okay? If there's any confusion on that, we can at the end of the end of this here, we'll do a millage breakdown, a millage calculation, and write it out on here so everyone can see it. But it's just gives you an idea of what the annual tax are, and then what you can do is take that annual tax. If you're closing on July 1st, then you can figure out your tax by counting a 365-day year, dividing the annual tax by 365. And then taking that number and multiplying it by how many days up from the first of the year to that point, right? That's the prorated tax on the seller side. The prorated tax on the buyer side would be what? If you calculate the proration for the buyer side, then you're going from July 1st to the end of the year, counting those days up and multiplying it out. Okay? Did I lose anybody on that? Does anybody do they have any questions on that, or do you want to wait till we break it down?
You good?
Yeah.
Break it down at the end of this. All right, moving on. Any questions about anything so far that we've reached up to on this? Any questions? Okay. So, dates and time of the essence. Dates and time of the essence. Written acceptance of all parties will be on or before what? Typically. Anyone? Written acceptance of this contract of all parties will be on or before. It can be 48 hours. What's most common?
24?
Yeah.
24 hours. So if you fill out a contract today, you're putting an offer in right now. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That contract's going over to the listing agent right now. You're going to put 5/11/22. By midnight tomorrow night, that is when you expect a response to the offer. Okay? If it's 10 o'clock at night, if it's 10 o'clock tonight, you're putting an offer in and you send it over. What if that listing agent doesn't see it until 7 o'clock the next morning? You know, what if they don't see it, and what if they're not able to get a hold of their seller until like 5 o'clock in the afternoon? It's a courtesy, I think, in my opinion, to give the extra day. Once you've closed business for one day, even though they have till midnight, you know, you're giving a little bit more of a window to breathe. When we were in the fast-paced multiple offer market that we were in, and we're still kind of in some areas, it was maybe going to hurt you if you did that, if you gave them that much time to collect offers. But if they're getting that many offers already, they're going to have a highest and best time period set anyway, right? They're already going to have that time picked for you. So if that's the case, what date do you put on there? If they have a highest and best date put on there, do you give them 24 hours or 48 hours, or do you give them the date of their highest and best? Okay, that's right. So if they have a highest and best put on there, if they say, look, I know it's Tuesday, but we're presenting offers at noon on Thursday or noon on Friday, put Friday's date on. Put Friday's date on. Okay? Any questions? No? Okay. Yeah, use the specific date which all parties have to accept the offer or reject it. Do not simply fill in a time period like 3 days. Always put a date. Always make sure you're putting a date. Okay? All right. Zoning. Zoning. What are we putting in here for zoning classification set forth in the local zoning ordinance? Residential. Unless the municipality, and your tax card would specify this, has a zoning ordinance of a specific designation that's not residential, like if it's R2 or R5 or R whatever, that's what you want to look for. The way I understand it, I have not seen that yet, but Pennsylvania law requires that the agreement contain a zoning classification of the property unless it is in an area that is zoned primarily or exclusively for single family homes. If the property is zoned to permit anything other than a single family dwelling, the zoning classification must be stated in the agreement where the buyer will have the right to void the contract. Let me read that again. If the property is zoned to permit anything other than a single family dwelling, the zoning classification must be stated in the agreement where the buyers will have the right to void the contract. If the zoning classification is not primarily or exclusively residential, insert the zoning classification in the space provided. Okay? The language of the agreement directs you to use the local zoning ordinance as your source for this information. Be careful to avoid using municipal directories or the seller's representation, which may not be accurate. Confirm the classification with your municipality at the time the property is listed and perhaps again at the time of the sale. If there is any question regarding permitted uses, have the buyer contact the municipality directly. In short order, for zoning classification, because this has come up in the past, in short order, if it's single family home designation, you can put residential, but you don't have to put anything. But that's only if the tax card or the deed designation says so. If it says something else, if it's zoned for something else, you need to make sure that that's spelled out for your buyer. If you're on the listing side, you definitely need to make sure that information is accurate before you even list it. Okay? Municipal access or gaining access to your municipality's ordinance board, you can search your county's website, or you can obviously Google the number, call the office and see if they have zoning designation maps for you. Most of them are online. Okay. Zoning's only important, guys. It happens a lot over here where you have a single family home that might be also zoned as a commercial property because it may have been a pizza shop before, it may have been a barber shop, could have been an apartment or another, multiple family dwelling. So you always have to make sure of those designations. Cover your buyer's backside. Do your homework. Take a few minutes and learn the property that they're buying. Okay. All right. Fixtures and property. Be sure to familiarize yourself with the pre-printed list of includeds, as a local practice may not have some of these items automatically included. So I like to take whatever's on the property designation sheet in the MLS is included, literally copy and paste it onto the contract. literally take what's off of the data sheet as included in the advertisement and spell it out. Don't take any shortcuts here. It will bite you. Same thing for non-excluded items, things that are not included. Yet if there's excludeds that are spelled out on that data sheet for the MLS, copy and paste it into the excluded subsection D there at the bottom. Make sure you copy and paste that in. Be specific about what's included and what's not. Okay? Don't take any shortcuts there. All right? Any questions so far? All right. The meat of what I wanted to really get into today was mortgage contingencies. So here we go. Check waived if the buyer is proposing a cash transaction. In some cases, the buyer may also waive this contingency where he is applying for mortgage financing, but is willing to do so without the protection provided by the contingency. For example, a strong buyer might waive the contingency even knowing that financing is necessary because the waiver will make the offer appear to be stronger to the seller. At the same time, however, the buyer who waives that contingency in this circumstance will be in default of the agreement if financing is not secured, leading to the likely loss of the deposit and the possibility of additional legal action. Waiver of this contingency should be done with great caution and only after fully advising a client of all possible repercussions. In short, if you know that your client's paying cash, what do you want to make sure of before you check that box? Anyone? What should you have already established by now before you check that box if you have a cash buyer? Proof of funds. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. It seems like an automatic, and I know it probably seems like I'm dragging the point out. I don't mean to, but it's so important. If your client's paying cash, do them a favor and yourself before you even get to this, and make sure that those funds are legitimately available by asking for proof of funds. Okay. Is it invasive? It might seem like it is. If you have good rapport with your client, it's not that invasive. You're trying to do business. It's so important though, because if they do put in there, if you haven't obtained any type of legitimate documentation of funds and you waive this and you get halfway through the transaction, deposit's already down, and your buyer does not have secured funds, and they have not elected they haven't elected a mortgage contingency, they're going to lose their deposit and the sale's going to fall through. They will lose their deposit. That cannot be litigated out. If they elect waived for the mortgage contingency and don't come through with the funds, they will lose their deposit. Period. End of story. Okay? Again, I don't mean to stretch it out or beat it to death, but this has been a problem in the past, and it shouldn't be. It should not be. Okay? On the other side of the mortgage contingency, you selected it, you've elected it, right? Excuse me. Throat's dry. All right. Pay special attention to the needs of your buyer clients when filling out the items in subparagraph A, which is the elected version of the mortgage contingency. Don't just fill in the usual, quote unquote, and then figure out after on an offer, after it's been accepted, if the client has any special needs for financing. Although this section may not seem significant, keep in mind that in a competitive market, a seller may accept or reject a particular offer based on the perceived likelihood that a buyer will be able to obtain financing. Changing the terms of an application may have a material impact on the buyer's ability for the financing. Applying for different terms or to a different lender than listed in the agreement may not be a default by itself, but if the buyer is turned down for financing and hasn't applied on the stated terms, then they may not be entitled to return of their deposit monies and maybe in default at that point. So if you have an FHA, what this means, if you have an FHA type of mortgage and you don't put FHA on there for type of mortgage and they don't qualify and they have to switch to a conventional and they're able to qualify somehow for a conventional. If you don't have that FHA spelled out in there and do a change in terms addendum and the deal can default just on that merit alone. So make sure you don't shortcut this section. The loan amount. The loan amount is how much money are they borrowing based on the pre-approval. Okay? Not the sale price. It's not the sale price. The loan amount is the loan amount. Okay? Not the sale price. All right? Moving down through this box. Minimum term, make sure you spell it out. 30 years. Type of mortgage, we just stated it. Conventional, FHA, VA. There's another one that you can get a second mortgage on for like a PFHA loan for a smaller amount to maybe cover closing costs or additional repairs. Those types of things can be noted in the second mortgage box. We can go into more detail on those at a later date. But if you ever run into a PFHA loan package, get with myself or one of your mentors or team leaders and go over what the PFHA loan is. And if you have any more significant questions, you can always call your lender. So relationship with the lender is priceless, guys. It's a good thing to have. It's a good thing to have. If you don't have one with a lender, establish one. All right. For conventional loans, the loan to value ratio is not to exceed. The buyer has the option to identify one or more lenders or mortgage brokers to which the buyer will make application. The buyer may include a maximum loan to value ratio for each loan. The purpose of asking the buyer to identify a lender is to help both the seller and the buyer avoid those lenders that may have been problematic in the past. So make sure you identify your lender. For the LTV, the loan to value is identified on your pre-approval. Okay? The loan to value is identified on your pre-approval. That is where you want your LTV. It's not to exceed. If it's 96%, that's what you put there. If it's 97.5, it's 95, 90, whatever it is, that's where you want to put it. Identify that lender right there. Bang. If you have the pre-approval, and you should at this point, you have to identify the lender. Do you have to put the city, state, and zip of the lender? No. But you do have to identify who the lender is. Okay? Make sure you identify exactly who the lender is. Any questions? No? Okay. If a copy of the documentation is not delivered by a deadline, this is for subparagraph B, delivering proof of approval. Upon receiving documentation demonstrating lender's approval, whether conditional or outright, a buyer's mortgage application according to the terms set forth above, the buyer will promptly deliver a copy of the documentation to the seller, but in any case, no later than. Use a specific date for this deadline for the buyer to deliver a copy of the approval to the seller. Time, again, time is of the essence. Be realistic, excuse me, be realistic in establishing that date by considering all elements in the approval process. The seller must receive a copy of a written approval by the deadline, or the seller will have the option to terminate the agreement in writing. You can not notifying, this is important, notifying the seller via email or telephone is not sufficient. While calculating a date to put in that blank space, be sure to include time for acceptance of the offer by the seller, filling out and submitting an application, action on the application by the lender, delivery of a copy of the approval, and any necessary cushion for unexpected delays or glitches. Many of these items will be based on market practice or the practice of local lenders. Be sure to have all this information at hand before filling out the agreement so you can provide a realistic estimate for your client. If a copy of the approval is not delivered to the seller by the deadline provided, the buyer is still obligated to seek financing. However, until written documentation is received, the seller has the right to terminate the agreement. Okay? To prepare an agreement that is contingent upon the sale and settlement of other property owned by the buyer, we'll get into that later, but make sure that you have in there a date that's manageable. 10 days out prior to settlement, 15 days out, 14 days out. What's the best way to, do you think, and I want to hear some ideas, what's the best way you think it is to obtain that date?
Have it before this.
Correct. How do we obtain it?
No, go ahead.
Ask.
What's that?
Ask your
lender.
Yeah.
Have a conversation with your lender, guys. You get that pre-approval. I've made it practice in some of the deals that I do where I would find out who they're banking with and get their contact information. I'll be on the phone with them probably before I get done with the first showing, or by the time I get home from the first showing. I'm calling the lender, if not before them. Right?
So, Doug,
yeah, go ahead.
There's a difference between a pre-qualification and a pre-approval.
Yes.
I thought, like, initially, and correct me if I'm wrong, I thought, you know, if they want to, you know, go out looking at houses, a pre-qualification is okay.
That's true. During COVID, you needed both.
But just as a word to the wise, do you suggest from the door, like, try to get them a pre-approval and skip past the preliminary?
What do you guys think?
Me personally, I think if a pre-approval is needed, that's what I asked for.
Yeah. When we were in COVID, it was required. You could not show a property. It was COVID restriction. We were mitigated that we could not show a property without a pre-approval. I loved that, to be honest. I mean, it was great because you're setting it. We were almost getting conditioned to get that pre-approval before we even met with them. Yeah.
My agent.
Yeah. Yeah. Andy's absolutely right. If you need it, why skip steps? Why create more work? Just get that pre-approval. Have that conversation with that lender yourself. If you've built rapport with your client, you've got them on a consumer notice, or at minimum have discussed with them the consumer notice and your rights, their rights as consumers to what they can, you know, choose as representation. Get that agreement signed with them, the buyer agency agreement, and really cross your T's and dot your I's, and then have a conversation with the lender. Get it done. And then establish that time of the essence for this. It's better to have that conversation up front to fill this date in here on B than to set a random date and you put your lender in a bind. And your lender may call you and say, remember, guys, we're all on the same team. Your lender may call you and say, look, I need more time than that, right? If we put 14 days prior to closing on this document, and they need more than 31 days to get financial approval, and they know that right out of the gate, and they call you and ask you, now you've got to create another document, right? Now, does it happen? Yes, it happens as you get through the transaction. Looks like you're going to hit that date. Then you stumble. The lender may drop the ball. You may have to change lenders, whatever. Yes, then you change those terms anyway. But save yourself some time and just have the discussion right out of the gate. Better yet, have it in an email. Now you've got a documentation, right? So now you've got backup to that date. If the loan originator says blank date, they can hit it. Now you've got it documented in an email. You can splatter it right there in that spot, and you're covered, right? So my point is, have those discussions, create those relationships, establish them now. Get your lenders into your circle, work them into your pipeline, work them into your engine, get them in your contacts on command, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Get them in there and create those relationships now so that these types of things can be avoided. We tend to make things more complicated by just simply not having the right conversations with the right people. Right? I mean, that's what it's a general rule of thumb in life. But in this industry, we have so many hands involved in this process. Simplify it by making sure you're having conversations with the people that have those hands in it. And get out in front of some of this. This is a good example of a situation where you can get out in front of it. You know, it can be 14 days, it can be 12, it can be 10. It really depends on the lender. Do your lender a courtesy. They'll actually be shocked if you get on the horn and say, look, or shoot an email and say, look, I understand how busy you are and can be. I'm sending you over a contract here that we're sending in an offer. Before I send it out, what funding date can you get on it if we were to execute this contract in the next 24 hours and close by X date? When would you be able to prove funding? Simple question. That's it. They'll tell you, right? Some of them might even be fearful to tell you because they're pigeonholing themselves. But if you don't make that conversation accessible, then you're complicating the process, whether you intend to or not. So make sure we're communicating that. Any questions on that? Andy, any insights, anything you can throw in there? Because I know you have a little bit of a...
Well, give it to me, I'll eat it.
So I was going to ask, what if, if you can reach out, like being able to reach out to that lender would be good, but what if you're trying to put them in with a lender, like they don't have someone that they're doing business with, then you have to create that relationship first, or that connection first. And then once you create the connection, ask the lender like, hey, I don't want just the pre-qual, I want the pre-approval.
Right. But you can. I mean, right. I mean, if you were able to obtain that contact information, if it's not one you're already working with, and your buyer gives you their contact information, make that introductory email include everything that you'd like to know. Right? Make that introductory email about who you are, who you're representing, and even copy your client on it. So your client sees that communication channel has been open.
That's fine.
And the lender can see that they've approved of that communication to be open. So now you open a line of communication with the lender. That initial email could just be, this is who I am, this is who I'm representing. These are the things that I would like to make sure we have so that you can do your job more effectively and we can communicate more clearly. Does that make sense? Yes, makes sense?
Totally.
Okay. All right, we'll move on. We'll step it up a little bit. Chris, just a reminder, Chris Keller's out today. So we're going to bleed into a little bit of our tech time right now. So we're just going to continue going forward with talking about this. We'll have a little bit of time for some tech at the end. So I wanted to make sure we got this in, so it kind of worked out because this is an important piece of the process. I want to make sure I wanted to go over. Is there any questions as we approach kind of the halfway point, really, of what we want to go over with regards to this document? Specifically come up already that you want to ask about? Anything? Okay. I like that. It's good. I know it's a lot. I know it's kind of like, why are we going over this nuts and bolts? It's important. It's so easy to overlook and take shortcuts, and it's a compliance issue. We want to make sure that we're not, doing anything to jeopardize our own licenses and putting ourselves in any type of jeopardy. It's my feeling or my instinct coming out of the renewal period that we're in right now, that there may be a microscope on agents to making sure their documents are up to speed. So let's just make sure that we're following protocol and sticking to the guidelines that we have in front of us. Again, resource you can tap into, parealtors.org, has the contract forms, has all the forms on it, and it has a separate PDF that you can download that I'm actually reading from, that is the guideline for each form. So how to use it, what it means, what does everything mean, okay? All right, we'll down through here. The FHA endorsement, H, subsection H. The language in this paragraph is required by the FHA VA to process a mortgage application. Insert the purchase price as stated in paragraph 2 in the blank. So that dollar amount there, that's the purchase price. Keep in mind that the lender may require the buyers to acknowledge a similar statement for the lender's amount. That's down the road in the process, and the lender would provide it. So this, for you as a buyer's agent, this is your purchase price or sale price. All right. Subsection I in this box. HUD, Housing and Urban Development rules require lenders to provide a notice called "For Your Protection, Get a Home Inspection." Buyer understands the importance of getting an independent home inspection and has thought about this before signing this agreement. Buyer understands that FHA will not perform a home inspection nor guarantee the price or condition of the property. The second box that would be checked would be if the requirement is that the buyers receive the notice before signing an agreement of sale. If that's for your protection, if they do it, they want to make sure that first box is checked. Again, you're discussing with an FHA buyer, any buyer, right? The importance of a home inspection. General home inspection is important. Should be discussed with your clients. There is a form in PAR that you can actually show them that discusses or breaks down the importance of each inspection. So PAR does have that form where you can, it's literally the form in there. It's the "For Your Protection, Get a Home Inspection" form. It's in there. It's in PAR. So you can find it. Okay. If the buyer decides to make application for FHA loan after signing the agreement, lender practice is generally to provide the notice and then ask the buyers to re-execute an agreement of sale. So if you're switching from a conventional to an FHA, your lender should provide that document, but it doesn't mean that they will. So cover your rear ends and make sure you go in and explain a home inspection. Do not take any shortcuts. Go in and make sure that that's covered. Okay.
So I'm sorry, I was a little interrupted.
That's
So
okay.
For that first box, is that only for FHA or
Yes, this box is FHA VA.
the whole box is
Correct.
for Okay. All right.
Yep. I mean, it's good practice on anything that if you ever mention a home inspection or your client asks you about them, it's not bad practice to have that, to have that document or be able to speak comfortably about the importance of a home inspection. We're not steering, we're guiding. It's important. You're making a big investment. Home inspection, general home inspection, if you're making this large of an investment, is that a bad thing to have? I know we were in a seller's market. I know that it was competitive, and I know that sellers were looking at loans that were not, if you had an inspection on your offer, it was getting turned down, right? I know we went through that. How do we protect our buyers? Give them all the information. Our number one duty is to protect our buyer, or protect the public. We're protecting our clients. So for their protection, explain what a home inspection is and how it's valued. Are we going to, again, the repercussions could be, and you could state that, the repercussions could be, well, I'm not going to get this offer if we put it on there. Okay. I've said that. I said it a handful of times to buyers throughout the entire market surge. You may not get it if we put it on there. You know what they've said to me in response? Then I don't want it. Because they're hiding something. You know, I mean, that whether that's true or not, that's not the matter. But if they say they want a home inspection, you put it on them. So for their protection, get a home inspection. Go over that with them. Okay. If a change in buyer status, we talked about this, ability to purchase, a buyer will promptly notify the seller and lender to whom the buyer submitted a mortgage application, if any, in writing. Change in financial status can include, but is not limited to, a loss or change of employment, so on and so on and so on. A buyer understands that applying for and or incurring an additional financial obligation may affect their ability to purchase the property. This is just making sure that you know and the buyer understands that if their status to purchase the home changes, we got to make sure we're abiding by the rules of the contract and notifying the seller. Simple as that. Does that mean it's dead in the water? No. But it means we're changing the terms of which they can purchase it. So we have to make sure that updating them is a premium of importance to us. Seller's representations. Again, all of this information pulled from the property description. Water, sewer, okay, all is obtainable on the property description or property data sheet, MLS data sheet. Land use, if there's any land use restrictions. These are all case-by-case basis. We won't drill into a rabbit's hole on all of this stuff. Case by case, you come across these things. You can literally drag and drop this into Google and look it up. If you find on a property data sheet that there is a Open Space Act restriction, you can drag and drop that, drop it in, and get yourself acclimated with what that means and what it means for your particular property or the property in question. Okay, all of that should be on the data sheet. If it's not on the data sheet, is it on the contract? No. If the seller's agent, listing agent doesn't put it on the contract, it's not there, right? So you've done your due diligence, you've asked the right questions, you don't have the answers, it doesn't go on the contract. It's better to have it absent than to put it in there if it's not right. But always make sure you do your due diligence. You check that tax card, you check the data sheet. You're doing your due diligence. You're doing what you can and what you know at that point. Okay? Any questions on that? Okay. All right. We get to 11 here. Waiver of contingencies. This is the agreement is contingent on buyer's right to inspect or repair the property or to verify insurability, environmental conditions, boundaries, certification, zoning, so on and so forth. Buyer's failure to exercise any of the buyer's options within the time set forth in this agreement is in itself a waiver of that contingency. So you've elected inspections. You've elected whatever inspections that you've elected. But going past the inspections, your contingency period is specified as 10 days. And you go 12 and haven't turned in an inspection report or have an inspection done. What does that mean? It does not mean that the contract is void. It means that the contingency has been waived. Okay? If you didn't file a change in terms addendum because you're running out of time on your contingency period for inspections, and you reach the contingency period and you don't have an inspection report, does not mean that the deal is dead. Now, it could mean the seller could say, well, you didn't meet the addendum, we're going to kill the deal. But all it means at this point, if they haven't killed the deal, is that you've waived the contingencies. Your buyer may not want to move forward, and that's okay. That's your buyer's right. But it doesn't mean the deal's dead. Okay, it probably means the deal's dead, but it doesn't mean that it is. You can still either ask for a change in terms to get a few extra days for the contingency, or accept the fact that you missed it and accept it as waived. In which case, you would still want to do a change in terms to cover your backside. That way your client acknowledges in writing that they missed the contingency period, and the seller acknowledges that the buyer knows that and accepts the property as is. Okay? Doesn't mean it's dead, but it probably is. But you can negotiate your way into a situation where you can allow it to be accepted as it was waived, as long as your buyer accepts it. Now, they may walk, but don't lose faith that it's a dead deal. Well, how can we prevent all that mess? Know your dates. If you don't have a grease board, get one. If you don't have a calendar in your phone that allows you to set dates, start doing it. If you're not in command and setting up your opportunities and putting your dates in as created tasks for each opportunity, start doing it. Get in the habit of checking command on a daily basis so you know where you're at in your opportunities. It's what command is there for. It's a centralized locale for you to put in all of your opportunities and your contacts and track where you're at. The simplest way to do it is to upload your documents into command after you've created your opportunity, and then go into your tasks on that opportunity, create your dates. Okay? And we're going to do that right now as a little mix and match of how we do it. We're going to go into command. We're going to go into command. We're going to create opportunities. Let's see if I have an opportunity in here. Okay, I have one list. I have one buyer active. It should be gone, but we'll activate. We'll bring it up.
Looks like you're a little behind on your command, Dad.
I am. You're right. Here's the checklist. Here's the checklist. Right here. We're going to add an item. All right. Inspection contingency. For the contract. The due date. Now, if you put a due date in here, should it be the due date of what's on the contract, or do you think it's better practice to put a due date in there that's a couple of days before? Yeah. Yep. I would put at least 48 hours before. Your inspection contingency is coming up. So if it's May 11th, I'm going to put in May 9th as my set date. Okay. And your date, your time, put it at 9 a.m. in the morning or 8 a.m. in the morning. And you check command, you know that item is there for you to check it, to make sure it's done right. Okay? So make sure that you go into your opportunities and put your dates in. Add your opportunity details. Add your items, and then you can look at your opportunity details as you're adding your items and your opportunity comes up. When you go to check that detail, it's going to have your checklist up here. It's going to tell you what's on there, and it's going to alert you to what needs to be done and when, keeping you constantly in the know of what's going on with each and every deal. Okay? Any questions on that? Any questions on that at all? No?
Nothing from here.
No? Andy, any questions?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. So get those dates in on your opportunities and keep track of them through command. If not, put them in your phone. That's what you have phone calendars for. But that's a quick and easy way to do it. Any questions in here? No? Okay. I'll throw it in there again. Make sure the bottom of every page is initial. It's easy to miss this one. It's easy to miss this one because you've got all these initials now going in, right? It's got all these initials going in, either waived or elected. It's easy to miss the two at the bottom. So make sure you don't miss at bottom of every single page. The last one, even though nothing's written there, waive it. Make sure you get an initial on that waived box. Don't leave yourself open to any risk. Don't leave yourself open to any risk. Be thorough and put that last box that there's nothing written there. I get it. But don't leave yourself open to anything that can be, that can be altered later or questioned. Okay, so waiving something that's not there is waiving something that could be put there. Don't put yourself at risk. All right. Any questions on that? On inspection contingencies in general? Any questions? All right. Remember that the seller has the right to obtain copies of all inspection reports from the buyer at no charge to the seller. Okay? The seller does have the right to obtain copies of that inspection report at no charge. So anytime that you get an inspection back, general or otherwise, and you're doing a reply to inspections, that seller has a right to see that inspection report in full. Okay? Any questions? One last note on inspections. I'll touch on this and we'll move on. The buyer reserves the right to make 2 pre-settlement inspections or walkthroughs of the property. The right to conduct these pre-settlement walkthrough inspections is not waived by the waiver of any of the inspections or repair contingencies in the agreement. So just because you've waived an inspection, or let's say you've waived all the inspections, your buyer still has the right to a pre-settlement walkthrough. Technically, they have a right to 2. Okay? So that's the last thing I will touch on with inspections. Beat that to death. I get it. So we'll move on. Title surveys and costs. Within 7 days from the execution of this agreement, a buyer will order from a reputable title company for delivery to a seller a comprehensive title report on the property. Upon receipt, the buyer will deliver a free copy of the title report to the seller. Essentially, once you've executed this contract, you sent a copy to the lender, you have sent a copy to a title and settlement company and or attorney. At that point, clock ticking, 7 days. Has anybody run into, if anybody's run into longer than 7 days, let me know, but I've yet to see it. 7 days is typically long enough. Specify it there in the blank spot, get it out, get the contract to the closing company. Typically, it's good practice to send this contract and any necessary documents to the lender once it's executed. Send it to the lender and send it to the title company. Now you've got the 2 parties that are going to be most involved in this transaction over the next 40 to 45 days on one email, right? The lender knows who the title company is, and the title company knows who the lender is. You've made that introduction. At the very least, some of the players may change. You may have a loan originator who may shift to a loan officer. You may have a title company person who's just processing the document, and it may shift to a different operation or a person in operations for the title company. The players may change, but the teams are the same. So getting those 2 teams joined at the hip right out of the gate is good practice. It opens the line of communications right out of the gate, makes things clear, and it gives you quick reference to go back and find emails. When all you have to do is type in the settlement company's name or the lender's name, right? And pull up your emails quick, right? Or you can put notes in command. Go back to command again. You can go back in command and put those notes in, okay? Any questions on anything thus far? Again, initials at the bottom of the page. Every single page. Make sure we're putting those notes in. I know contracts are so much fun. Does anybody need a stretch minute, a stretch second? I'll give you a
I
second.
could go use some coffee.
What's that?
Said I might go grab some coffee.
Well, why, and listen, seriously, if everybody needs to take 2 or 3 minutes, go to the bathroom, let's do it. Let's go do that now. We'll come back and finish this off. Go ahead and take 3 or 4 minutes. Let's take a break. Get a breather, stretch your legs. We'll come back and jump right back into this in a few minutes. You guys have any questions?
There's something that I think I screwed up.
You did.
Yeah, it was that. I want to say I put the purchase price and stuff.
You did. That's okay. It's not, they were pre-approved for that amount. So it's not like, if you didn't put enough, that'd be a problem. Right? If you didn't put a contingency loan amount that was high enough to cover the cost of what they were doing, then that could be voided. That could void the deal. If you have enough, that's fine. It is good practice to look at the loan amount because you don't always get it. Right? You don't get it until you've got the pre-approval. Right? So if you only have a pre-qualification and not a pre-approval, you may not know it. So you plug that number in. Now you know, right? Go back, and I did catch it the other day, but it's one of those situations where you got an offer accepted. Right? Your loan amount is set, right? You're in good shape. So imagine if I need protection access, you know, pick your battles. That was what I did there. I mean, it's not going to kill your deal. If you didn't have enough, we'd have a different conversation. I mean, if that would have said something that wasn't going to be enough to cover the loan, make that contingency valid, then we would correct it. Now you know. And that loan amount can be specific to, like, if you know that their loan to value is 95%. On a $100,000 house, you know they're putting down 5%. Right? So you know they're putting down $5,000 on a $100,000 house. So you know the loan amount's 95. Right?
Yeah, I think the loan value is only the lender.
That's okay. But you caught it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You caught it. The best learning tool that there is outside of, you know, these wonderfully overly invasive and extremely dull situation. But the best learning source is doing it and learning it as you go. I mean, we learn it through here. We hopefully people can benefit from watching these and learning these contracts. You know, if you're filling one out, I can go back and, you know, create a resource for myself and watch these videos. But the reality is, until you do it, you don't know. So I mean, I know I'm hands-on. I got to do it to learn. You don't do it to learn it. You know. You're gonna have questions. You'll do 4 or 5. You're still have questions. You know, the agents have been doing this 4 or 5 years. They still have questions. And not to make anybody's ears perk up and get a little stressed out, but the contract may be changing. They're talking about making some alterations to it in July. So we may be doing this again in August. You know, but again, it's just one of those things. Don't take for granted. Why I really want to dive into it today and like break it down like this is because it's easy to take a lot of this stuff for granted. A lot of agents do. So it's like, oh, I'll just pull from some of those files. Yeah, they throw it out. They'll give me one. See here, just fill this out. Well, not how I did it. How they did it might not be right. Right? It might not be. I know I was guilty of that first handful I did because I was copying off somebody else. Right? But what's the teacher tell you in class? You're copying off of Joey, and Joey's if you got an F. You got an F. You get an F. So it's just easier for me to do it. But these resources in PARealtor.org, man, if you're in the NAR and you can get access to it, it's priceless. priceless resources. And the guide, I mean, this is the guide, the contract, give you a scope of how this is. The contract is 14 pages, right? Okay. The guide to the contract is 55 pages.
Sheesh, that's a lot.
Well, I mean, it just goes to show like what is in this thing. It shouldn't be taken for granted. We need to make sure we're following it. And nobody here has to be a lawyer. Like, you know, nobody's asking you to be a lawyer, but there's a reason why we have a license to practice real estate. And there's a reason why this information is on the state website to access it. I mean, it's not, you know, it's easy for us to get into those situations where we just fly through it and we just do it. And this is the way we've always done it and whatever. But it's also,
I knew the contract was 14 pages, but I didn't know the guide was over 50 pages.
yeah, the guide's 55 pages. Yep. Maybe a page or two at the beginning, like of contents or whatever. So it's about 50 pages. So, I mean, is it a lot? Yeah, it's a lot. But if you ever, like I print, this is the one I have in here is this actually one that I printed out when I first started. And after like maybe my second or third deal. And I use it, I have it marked. I mean, I have Post-it notes on things that I found to be the most common questions that I had every time I filled out a contract, and I have it marked. So I keep this sucker in my briefcase. And I have a big binding clip that I put on it, and I keep it with me. Even if I know I'm sure I have the answer, I know I'm sure I got it, I'll pull it out and make sure. You know, it's easy to take for granted what we don't realize we may not know, we may not be certain on. There's so much we have to remember, right? There's so much we have to absorb all the time. Having these types of tools is just priceless, and being able to access the information whenever you need it. So if you don't have PAR access, let me know and we'll print out a couple for you, or at least get you copies of it, and that way you have the guide to pull from, and we'll go through it. So
I still don't have it yet. I have gone over a sales agreement though, but
okay.
Yeah, I still don't have it yet.
Okay.
All right, now I'm going to be switching over that.
Okay. Yeah, anybody that's got to jump off, that's all good. Like I said, we bled over into the tech time to go over some of this. I just felt like it was an important use of time today to go over. It was asked. I was asked by a few of you to go over this in a little bit more detail. If I got a little bit too long-winded in some of these subsections, I apologize. Some of it's important and felt like it was necessary to cover. But any other questions that anybody has right now at this point? Otherwise, we'll jump in and continue. Oh, yep, you need admitted. Let's see it pop up on my other screen there. All right. So we'll scroll down. We'll scroll down ahead here. Jump ahead a little bit. All right. Page 12. That's okay. At the bottom, this would be under section 26, subsection C. This will be the default and termination return of deposit monies. So, see ya. Buyer and seller agree that if there is a dispute over the entitlement to the deposit monies, that it be resolved in blank days, 180 if not specified. Now, it's pretty good practice, if you will, to change that to 30 days. To 30 days. The reason is if there's a dispute over that money for any reason, and a mediation is required, or is requested, but not does not end up being granted or isn't followed through by one of the parties, that money will sit there for 180 days. If a dispute is requested and obtained, and there's a mediation that occurs, and there's a court order drafted stating whom is to receive that money, fine. But if you wait 6 months, both parties now have to wait, or the initiating party has to wait. They have to wait 6 months. They have to wait 180 days for that money to land in the person who, essentially, if the 180 days comes and goes, it's forfeit back to the original person who drafted that money, or that check. So default and termination and return of deposits. In many places throughout the agreement, the buyer is given the right to terminate the agreement with the return of deposit monies. As set out in this paragraph, ground rules for this process and acknowledges that there are other situations in which the parties might claim entitlement to deposit monies. The intent of this paragraph is to explain to the parties that brokers who are holding money in escrow are not only bound by the terms of the agreement and the intent of the parties, but also by the law and regulation regarding the release of the money. Specifically, the parties are informed that brokers cannot return escrowed funds where there is any dispute over their distribution, and that brokers do not have legal authority to determine whether a party should be entitled to those funds or not. Bottom line, the broker, the agent, the client themselves do not have the right to determine who gets awarded a deposit money if it's under dispute. Under no circumstances are we to release escrow money to either party without a fully executed termination notice. Under Pennsylvania law, the following are the only 4 circumstances in which the broker can distribute deposit monies. 1, if there is no dispute. 2, according to the terms of the agreement signed by the buyer and the seller directing broker on how to distribute the monies. 3, according to the terms of a final court order. Or 4, according to the terms of a prior written agreement between the buyer and the seller that directs the broker how to distribute the deposit monies if there is a dispute between the parties. That 4th option was added and took effect in September of 2009. So this is something that grows or kind of is amended as time has gone on. But bottom line is, under no circumstances are we to just automatically assume, oh, the buyer gets the deposit money back. Well, if you don't have a signed termination by the seller and they come back and try to say, yes, you do, you just violated a contract. You violated an order. And now that money's got to be recouped, right? Not a good situation. Not a good situation at all. Under no circumstances do you release deposit money to either party or okay that it's going to be released to either party without a fully executed termination agreement. Fully executed meaning both the buyer and the seller have signed it and dated it. So it's signed and dated, fully executed. If you don't have a fully executed termination agreement, that escrow money is not going anywhere. That hand money is not going anywhere. Additionally, we'll get past the dispute section here. I want to get to that subsection G. I've talked to a few folks about this. Subsection G is bolded in all caps for a reason. If the checkbox in this subparagraph is checked, the seller's options in case of the buyer's default are limited to declaring the agreement null and void and keeping the deposit monies as liquidated damages. Plain and simple. That's it. As it states. If you don't check that box, if that box is not checked, you could be putting your buyer in a pickle. If they default because a failed inspection, and that box isn't checked, could a seller come back and argue that or have it mediated that they're suffering liquidated damages for not having the property on the market or whatever the case they argue? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So make sure that box is checked. The seller is limited to retaining sums paid by the buyer.
Dad, I gotta go. I'm gonna keep this on for Andrew, but I gotta go pick up Elaney.
All right. Thanks, bud. We're coming down the home stretch here, so we're just about done. Anybody has any questions on mediation or what have you? Go ahead and read that subsection 27. I'm not going to do it here. Same thing for most of these. I want to get down to the bottom, to the brass tacks, and that's special clauses.
You don't have to worry.
We're going to be doing a workshop in Altoona here at the end of the month as well. We'll see about maybe getting it recorded and putting it on our channel in Pittsburgh. We're offering it here as well, in addition to on these clauses and how they are used, which ones should be used when, and why. We'll go over it in more detail in one of those at a later date. But the base of it is sale and settlement of another property contingency. So if you have a buyer that is selling another property, and we'll break it down quickly for you here, as we're running on time here. And I appreciate everybody who's tuned in for anybody that's jumped on for tech training, expecting tech training, and they're getting contract training. I apologize, but this is something that I want to make sure we did go over a little bit more in detail. These special clauses, if a clause to be added relates to the settlement date, you might want to put the date. Settlement may be postponed up to 30 days as an option by the buyer with a written notice to the seller on or before a specific date. So if you have a contingency to close on a certain date for the buyer's property that they're selling, you want to make sure that you stipulate on that PAR SSP form that the settlement could be postponed up to 30 days. If that happens, we make sure we stipulate that so we're protecting our buyer. Okay? Written notice on or before a specific date. If you know that you're getting close to the time for which you have to sell, the buyer has to sell their property in order to close on the property that they're making an offer on, you got to make sure you're meeting your dates. We're going back to dates again. So if you're getting close to that date, you're getting within 5 days of that date. Usually, I mean, most of the time your listing agent is probably going to be on you. But if they're not, you got to make sure you're on the other agent, the buyer's agent on the other side of the deal, communicating with them on a regular basis so that you know the status of that deal constantly and getting those updates. So you're feeding updates to your agent, your buyer's agent, your seller's agent, listing agent on the other side. Okay? So if you have a buyer who's selling their property and they're under contract, you have to make sure you're in communication with that other agent at all times. Okay? I know there's going to be questions on that because there's several forms there and what they mean. we're not going to go into them now today. We went through a large chunk of this contract. I'm glad we did. But we will jump into these contingencies, what they mean, and when they should be used. Again, we'll be doing that at a later date in the next couple of weeks. By the end of the month, we're going to be doing a workshop in Altoona for sure. And we'll weave it into our PC classes as well. All right. Additional terms. Can anybody give me an example of an additional term? What would an additional term be?
You said the property could appraise at or above the value or the purchase price.
Property, yes. Property should a good additional term. Again, you have mortgage contingency you could put in mortgage contingency that states in this additional terms property must appraise at or above either sale price or lending value, right? Going back up to page 3, bottom of page 3, your loan amount is blank. Your term could be, We want the loan, we want the property must appraise at or above the loan amount stated above. So if you have that.
Keep the utilities on.
What's that?
And you also said to keep the utilities on through.
Another term could be, another term should be, utilities to remain on through settlement, or utilities to remain on through closing. Okay? Any questions on that? Any other additional terms that could pop up or could be used? What if there is a lawnmower in the shed at the time of the contract being written, and you're talking to the other agent, and you say, you're talking to the listing agent, and they say, everything's included. Okay, everything's included. Is it on the advertisement? You copied and pasted it and put it included, right? But you don't see lawnmower there. And you've had a conversation with the listing agent. Oh, yeah. Don't worry about it. It's included.
Lawnmowers included in the sale.
Correct. Exactly. Make an additional term. Make it stand out. Put it in the additional terms. Lawnmower located in shed at the time of the agreement is included in the sale. I know it sounds a lot, like it sounds like we're writing a law novel here, but you're covering their tail end. Because then, if it's not included, the listing agents looking at the contract, they're going to look at, they may not even look at the includeds on page 2. They may not even look at it. So if they don't, and they catch that, and it's not included, now you're protecting the buyer. You're protecting the seller too. So it's okay to make a standout statement about something that's not on the data sheet, but was on the property that the buyer wants, right? What else can be put in this additional terms? There's one other thing that we can put here. That's a big deal. You put a lot of things here, but there's one thing in particular. We've talked a lot about them over the last month and a half. We've had Fauna here twice. Warranty. Right? If your buyer wants a warranty included in the sale, make sure you include it in the terms. Warranties above. But this is where you can spell it out again. Make sure we're talking those special clauses. What it is, additionally, you want your buyer to have. What do you want to negotiate on behalf of your buyer? Make sure you spell it out in those additional terms. Okay? Also, make sure those initials are covered on those last 4 lines. Estimated closing costs, they should have that. Consumer notice, obviously. Deposit money notice. If you've done an estimated closing cost for your buyer, there's a deposit money notice. There's an estimated closing cost worksheet that has a deposit money notice built into it. Use that one, you've got that covered. And a lead-based paint disclosure, if you're going over them, if you're selling a house or transferring a property in real estate that has been built before 1978, lead-based paint disclosure is required, although the new seller's disclosure has it on it as well. So make sure you cover your bases when it comes to lead-based paint. Those last 4 initials, buyer's printed name, signature, and date, and an executed contract is only valid when both parties have signed, printed, and dated the document. Any questions?
Hey, boo, what are you in here sneaking and doing? Yeah.
Any questions?
There's a question that was on that kept stumping me on the national salesperson exam, where a buyer has a chandelier that clearly matches their personal property, their personal dining room set. And the question is basically, the buyer asks if it's included. Do you say yes, it is, because it matches the dining room, or do they have the right to take it with them if they fix the hole, repair the damages, or say no, it's their personal property, it's And I forget the fourth option, but
I got that question too, and it stumped me as well.
Yeah.
So how many of you already, and you'll see it a lot too, Andrew, if you're getting started, how many of you seen ceiling fans included on the disclosure? The seller's disclosure. You'll see on the seller's disclosure, ceiling fans are included, right? Well, ceiling fans are attached, right? So what? Of course they're included.
Yeah.
No. Again, it's one of those things we easily take for granted. If that buyer has that's a $500 ceiling fan and they want to take it, that seller wants to take it, they're taking it.
Right.
If it's not listed in the included, it doesn't count. It's not included. Don't take it for granted. Don't take it for granted. Make sure that you spell that out. If ceiling fans aren't listed or chandelier isn't listed on the included, go into your additional terms, spell it out.
Okay.
Obviously, you're going to have a conversation with the agent prior to that. One of those questions you could ask them is, I noticed you didn't include ceiling fans, and there's 3 ceiling fans in this structure. Is the seller taking them? Now you might get no, of course they're not. Right? But don't be afraid to come off like I'm an idiot because you're being thorough. Right? The second you don't, the next thing you know, you go to do that final walkthrough, that pre-settlement walkthrough, and the ceiling fans are gone. There's a big hole in the ceiling.
Yep.
Right? So great question, Andrew. Don't take for granted anything that's included. If it's not listed and it's in the house or on the property, ask the question first, then spell it out in the contract. Even if they told you verbally, yeah, the ceiling fans are included, of course they are. You can throw it in the included or put them in the additional terms. Make sure that you're spelling it out.
That way you're covered because it's in the contract, and then on a walkthrough if they're gone. The second that you're not being thorough because you think it's being expeditious is the second you're going to get trimmed. And the second you get caught, you're going to wish you'd spent that extra 2 minutes doing it. Yep. Right? I mean, when has it ever been a bad thing to be thorough? Time is we need to get this offer in. If 3 minutes or 4 minutes to be thorough on a contract is going to cost you a deal, you need to attend Joe's time blocking workshop tomorrow at 4 o'clock because you got a time blocking problem. Okay? Yes, that was a cheap plug to an actual workshop tomorrow at 4 o'clock on the Zoom channel, on the Zoom link with Joe. We'll be in-house to conduct a time blocking workshop. I said it earlier in the ELC meeting, I'm going to be, I may not be here physically, but I'm going to be on that Zoom because nobody probably more than me needs that. But the time blocking workshop tomorrow, make sure you guys jump in for that. If you're not able to be here, I'd encourage you to try to come in and be a part of it live. If you can't be, jump on Zoom. If you're in Altoona or Johnstown and want to attend it in our office, we'll have a watch party tomorrow evening. For sure, you can come in and watch it then with us in office. If not, you can jump on Zoom in the convenience of wherever your locale is and watch it. It's going to be a very, very good one. I'm really looking forward to this one. For those of you who struggle with time management, tune in for that one. That's tomorrow. Is it Lana? Alana, I'm getting the time right, yeah? 4 o'clock? Can anybody confirm that? Like, I don't, this is what I mean. Get those confirmed. That time blocking. Let me look here. Anybody get the exclusive on Monday morning? The weekly exclusive?
Yeah, I do. I can check real quick. You said it's tomorrow at 4. Yep.
And 11th. Oh, it's not on there. Oh, there it is. Wednesday. Yep, 4 to 5. Yep. Thank you, Andy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's tomorrow from 4 to 5. We will do a recap tonight from 7:30 to 8:30 ish of on the contract, I'm not going to dive as deep, so we'll just go over it tonight, have a discussion regarding the ins and outs of the contract. I already have my lines tabbed out, so what we'll talk about tonight. So won't be as in the weeds as we got today. I just wanted to make sure that we had an on-file copy, in our YouTube channel of going over the contract step for step, pretty much step for step. There's still some more you can learn. But again, go to parealtors.org, check out the forms and the guidelines to each forms. If you have ever have any questions, you can be a little more thorough with getting those questions answered by looking that up or giving us a call. We'll walk through it with you as well. So tonight, 7:30 for recap. Tomorrow, we have Shift Book Club as well in the afternoon, 12:30, and again at 7:30. And then we also have the time blocking workshop tomorrow with Joe from 4 to 5. Any questions or anything before we depart?
I am finally part of the weekly exclusive. That email just came in. And my picture's at the bottom and my bio. And so now I can see and have the Zoom links for myself for all these meetings, and I'm super excited.
Very convenient, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Huge. Yep, it is nice. So keep an eye on that. Typically, Andrew, those are distributed about 8:02 every Monday morning, like clockwork. Yeah, and that gives you up-to-date information on what we're doing. The Zoom link should stay the same. I'm not going to promise anything, but we have a Zoom link for everything now. One Zoom link for everything. So tonight, same Zoom. What was that?
Okay, great. So if I ever need the Zoom link, I can find it somewhere and just copy and paste.
Yep.
Very convenient.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Again, I will not be here next week. Jennifer Burns will be in. Really, really good class on what can go wrong in a deal, which I thought was a good bookend to this class or follow up to this class. Talking contracts and shifting into discussion about what can go sideways in a deal. Jennifer's going to have that for you next week. And I will see most of you in 2 weeks. If you have any questions, give me a call, shoot me a text, shoot me an email. Otherwise, have a great week. Enjoy Red Day on Thursday, and I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Doug.
All right. Bye, guys.
Thank you, Doug.